But one reason they have not mentioned yet for leaving the United States to go across seas to live a better life is because of all the reasons we've heard is because of women. But not once have I heard, oh, I'm leaving the United States because of white supremacy. I'm getting my passport and my visa to go across seas to live a better life because I cannot stand how they treat me here in the United States due to white supremacy. Not once.
Hello, YouTube. It's your boy, the Passport Bro Wingman, coming at you again with another YouTube video. And the title of this video is called Passport Bros Cosign White Supremacy and Ignore Anti-Blackness, says the Lunch Lady. And the way this video came about was I was watching some critiques of the Passport Bros, and this lady in particular came up. And you saw the clip in the beginning. To sum up her point, she pretty much just trying to say that in a sense, she always just hears about, in a sense, Passport Bros complaining about, the trope is that we complain about like women, and for the most part, that's all we're pretty much complaining about. But we don't really talk about any of the other benefits of traveling, such as, in her particular case, she says she never heard us talk about the benefit of getting away from white supremacy. And I'm assuming she's saying this to say that that she would kind of co-sign us if we were leaving for that reason. She can kind of get down with it. I don't think that's the case. I think she's very disingenuous. I think she just tried to find some way to kind of, I think she was trying to look for a gotcha moment for the Passport Bros. And this is how she was trying to get us. So, as you notice, they've tried all types of ways to try to shame us. And so this tactic is more so trying to say that we don't care anything about the Black community. We're just going along to get along with all the racism. We should be more involved than we are, but we're not. And in a sense, we all should be called like raccoons. We're all are pretty much raccoons, and we're not really trying to help the fight for equality in the United States. And so, quote unquote, she's trying to expose us for the most part. And I just want to use this video to debunk this whole theory and this whole thought, and just show her that nothing can be further from the truth. I mean, I just literally in my last video, and I'm going to leave that towards the end of my video where you can check on that one as well, in which I was debunking, another woman who complained about Passport Bros going to certain countries. Like she said, we only go to Thailand, we only go to Brazil, we only go to Colombia. What about these other countries? And one of the reasons I stated that Passport Bros go to these countries in particular is because there's less anti-Blackness, and in many of these countries, they don't have the same negative history as other countries, such as, of course, United States, countries like Argentina, where when they went to war, they pretty much tried to kill off a lot of the Black soldiers and that kind of thing. So a lot of the other countries, such as Brazil and Colombia, even parts of like the Philippines and that kind of thing, they don't have the same type of dark history towards Black people, which is why a lot of Black people gravitate towards that. Not to mention that countries such as Brazil and Colombia, they have a very high African population there, which is why it's, in my opinion, it's easier for Black men to transition and go to those countries if they want to leave the United States, because there's already a large population of African people there. The people there are very familiar with African people, especially in Brazil. There's a mix of people of all varieties, of all phenotypes. So people there are used to seeing dark people. You'll be surprised. You should look at some of the women's hair in Brazil. Very natural. Some of them have locks. They have just beautiful long flowing hair. They have long flowing hair. They have afros. All types of stuff. So they have no shame for their hair down there. And I said it to say that the people there are very comfortable with an African presence there. So it's very easy for Black men to go down to Brazil or even go down to Colombia, which has not had really any bad history with Black people. It's very easy for Black men to go there. And what I'm going to show you in this video is I'm actually going to show you some data to show that especially Latin American countries have the most tolerance for people of other races, and especially like black people in general. Not to say that there aren't prejudice, and not to say that there isn't racism. So let me address that. So here's the thing: prejudice is in all people. Prejudice is in black people as well. There's certain types of things we look at and we have our own prejudice against. Prejudice is one thing. It only becomes a problem when it becomes racism, when there is a power dynamic in which, because of someone's prejudice, they can affect people or harm people, that kind of thing. And that's why in many cases they say that black people cannot be racist, because we don't really hold a whole lot of power, especially with the United States. I think we only own about maybe like, I think they were saying like 2% of the wealth or something like that. So it's not like a whole lot of power that we can wield over other races. But in addition to that, in spite of that, yeah, you may have a black person that uses racial slurs or says something that's prejudiced towards like another group of people. You have that everywhere. I mean, you're not gonna get away from that. And what I'm trying to say is, but here's the difference: when you leave the United States, it's more about, when it comes to prejudice, it's more about your nationality, where you come from, and that kind of thing. Because what you'll find out, me myself, I've been to different European countries. Like I said, I've been to the Netherlands. I've been to Germany. I've been to Ukraine. Um, and what you will find out when you're in these countries, there is, to some degree, you will hear some prejudice sometimes here and there towards like some of the Africans there. But what you will notice is a lot of times when they figure out that you're American and you're not from Africa, their whole demeanor changes towards you. Unfortunately, in some cases, in some countries, there's like some stereotypes that go along with some of the people from some parts of Africa. Like for example, Nigeria, there are some people, they may try to stereotype them as being scammers and all that kind of stuff like that. I don't believe it. Like, believe it or not, I don't try to stereotype people. But what I am trying to say is that there are prejudices in several different countries and amongst different people. And that's everywhere, even in Africa. I mean, there is also a thing called xenophobia, in which, for example, in like Romania, or where they have like I believe they're called the Roma people. Like when you go there, a lot of times it's almost like a classism type thing, where a lot of these countries, especially like in Eastern Europe, sometimes when you go into these countries, the way they look at you as a foreigner is they're more worried about the foreigners that come in there and try to steal jobs. And the reason for that is a lot of these countries they don't have a strong infrastructure. There's a shortage of jobs. There's lots of poverty there. So they're very protective of the jobs and the few opportunities that they do have there. So a lot of times when they see people claiming asylum coming from like war-torn countries and that kind of thing, a lot of times they kind of have prejudice towards them, and sometimes sometimes they tend to be very xenophobic towards some of these people. In many cases, or obviously in some cases ignorant, but also in some cases it's because they have a fear that the people will come and steal the few opportunities that they have, that kind of thing. So I say that to say that if you even look now in the United States, where a lot of people are kind of looking at some of the immigrants sideways that come into our country or come across the border, put it this way, there are like prejudices and there are like worries about infrastructure. Do we have enough to support these people? Will these people take my opportunities? And I say that to say that when you go into different countries, here and there, you may experience that. Like, even to the point where, and this was a question that comes up a lot. People try to ask, when passport bros go to these countries, do the foreign men there, like, how do they feel about passport bros, regardless of their color, about them coming and taking the women and that kind of thing? And I've always said this: in general, they have no problem, because again, there's a large pool of single women there, and in many cases, the men that they have their own preferences. Like I stated in my last video, for example, in the Philippines, they don't tend to like the women. They don't tend to like the Filipino women who have like curly hair and that kind of thing. But us being passport bros, especially myself, I love women with curly hair. I don't have a problem wifing up a woman like that and going to their country and taking that woman off their hands. And what I'm trying to say is also keeping in mind that there's not that many people with passports. The amount of people that actually are traveling that do go to these countries, remember, we're spread to completely different countries. It's not like we're all traveling to one country at the same time. We're going to a variety of different countries. And the small amount that do travel, I mean, if you look at how large the world is, the world could easily absorb those men and still have pools and pools of date opportunities still available, even for the local men. So what I'm trying to say is not really that big of a deal. But however, I will say, we say this before, there may be some local men there, obviously, that don't necessarily want you dating, quote unquote, their women and that kind of thing. Although at the end of the day, some of the women they're gonna do what they want to do, period. You know what I mean? So there are some women who do see a foreigner and say, well, I can't date them because my father or so and so doesn't want me dating them, or that kind of thing. That does happen, but me myself, I haven't really dealt with a lot of that. And I've said this before. When I went to Thailand, I literally had a cab driver try to hook me up with his daughter. And there's been many passport bros that talked about when they went to some of these countries, even in Brazil, they've been approached by some fathers that have tried to get the passport bros to meet like their daughters, and see if they can kind of like hook them up for the most part. So this happens because it's a win-win for like a lot of the fathers, because that's one less mouth for them to have to feed. And then also, since a lot of times passport bros are more stable than some of the men in their own country, this kind of really helps out a lot. Not to mention that when those women marry those men and come back to the States, sometimes those women, they come here, they work jobs, they send money back home. So what I'm trying to say is it's kind of a win-win for both parties. Now, why did I bring this up? I brought this up to say white supremacy is a global situation. What I found out maybe a few years back, and I was actually surprised, when Europe came and started colonizing like throughout the world, you'll learn that almost throughout the whole world, it's pretty much has been colonized at one point by Europe at some point, or if not European powers, that kind of thing. And I say that to say that as a result, you're going to have a little bit of like quote unquote, white supremacy everywhere to some degree. For example, like I said, when you go to some of these Asian countries or Latin American countries, you'll notice there's always like a preference somewhat for like lighter skin. You got a lot of women in these countries doing the bleaching creams. You got a lot of them who have curls, both in Latin America and Asia, in Asia, they have curls, but they're straightening their hair. So they have colorism there and that kind of thing. So of course you're going to have that everywhere. I just think it's a very silly thing to not go to these countries because of anti-blackness or white supremacy. We almost daily live under that in the United States. Or even to my UK brothers, same thing there. You're literally living in it. And I've always said this, whenever I leave the United States, it's almost, I'm not going to say, put it this way, it's so much less severe, it almost feels to some degree like it's not even there. Like, I never have an issue. Like, I've been to Colombia in the double digits, and I never have any issues with police officers being profiled or that kind of thing when I go down to Colombia. Same thing when I went to Brazil, even though I've only been to Brazil once. But here's the thing. I do know that there is a situation in which the police are police brutality towards some of the black Brazilians there. But as a tourist there, especially American tourists, you're literally going to be more like in the tourist areas, and of course, since you have funding, it's not really going to be an issue there. A lot of times you can kind of blend in with the locals. So since a lot of African Americans can blend in with the locals, they don't really have the situation where they're battling white supremacy most of the time. You can kind of just, in other words, what I'm trying to say is you're not discriminated against as far as women. You're not discriminated against as far as getting businesses. Now there may be an issue here and there with the police, but me myself, I've never experienced that. There was a YouTuber, Vibing with Fred. He did have a situation with the police when he went outside of the tourist area, and they pulled him over and they thought he was a local. But when they saw he was American, they pretty much let him slide, which is why I keep telling you a lot of times it's more about nationality than it is like your race. So I said it to say that white supremacy is pretty much a global system. There's nowhere you're going to go to necessarily get away from it, because almost every part of the world has been somewhat colonized to some degree. So for you to say that we don't care about white supremacy, yes, actually we do. And actually, that's one of the reasons that I actually mentioned in my last video that we actually like traveling, is to actually get a breath of fresh air. Even Phil Scott from the African, I think it's the African Diaspora channel, he mentioned as well that he encourages brothers to travel back to Africa, travel to, like, I think he was in Turkey before. He said it was just a breath of fresh air to get away from all the toxic racism in the United States. Once you leave the States, it's completely different. Even in Europe, I challenge guys to go to Germany. Go, even though they try to say Germany has, and I'm not going to say that there isn't a percentage there that is prejudice, or in some cases even, racist to a degree, but I can assure you it's way less than it is in the United States. I can assure you that as a person that's been there. And even in the UK, same thing. I say the same thing. So I say that to say that I'm going to show you a few brothers' channels as well. There's actually one guy in general who actually lives in Africa with, like, Oshay's there as well. And they just talk about all the time how it's just like nice to get away from, like, all the racism in the States. They're constantly talking about building. So our thing is this, especially to the women. It's not that we don't care about white supremacy or anti-blackness. We do care about it. We know it's there. But the thing is, in many cases, we feel that by leaving the States, we can put it this way. BMT has a channel that has all the Pastor Bros on there. I think he's almost now at like 20,000 people. And he just recently is trying to release this app. The purpose of that is so that we can network. The purpose of the networking is so we can build something. Because I think the real problem is in the States is we need infrastructure. We need to build. The problem is every time we try to build, it gets sabotaged or that kind of thing. So we're just trying to find other ways to network and to make money, especially if we can do it outside of the United States. We don't necessarily have racism on our neck. So that's that. So let me get into this video. I've already gone on a long tangent. I just want to touch on some points real quick. I don't want to keep this too long. But for example, let me start with the brother I talked about before, because so here's a guy, his channel is Go Black to Africa. He's been living in Africa for a long time now. I remember when he had even less subscribers. I've been watching him for a while. Please subscribe to his channel if you have not. He has very, very good content. If you want to know anything about Africa, this is definitely the guy you need to go through. He has wonderful streams. And in this video, and I'm not going to play it because I don't want to get, it's not so much copyrighted, but I don't want to keep the video too long. But I'm just going to address some of the stuff he was saying. So pretty much he was just saying in this video was that, why would you leave the United States where you're already struggling and then you go to Africa where in many cases the infrastructure is not as strong? You go there and then you're struggling as well. And I say that to say that, many men Pastor Bros have gone to Africa saying, I'm going to get away from white supremacy. I'm going to go there. I'm going to start building up. But they go there not knowing the conditions of the countries there, and they wind up struggling. So what he's kind of advocating is, why don't you stay in the States, get your education, build yourself up, get some remote work. That way you have something to work with. Then you can necessarily go to, then since you have capital now, you can go to Africa, start building things up, get some businesses going and that kind of thing. So we do have brothers that do, and he talks a lot about white supremacy and all the issues happening in America. So he himself is proof that what she's saying is just a pure lie. So that's him. So please subscribe to his channel if you have not. Also, to address some of the issues, like she said, almost saying like we basically ignore all the anti-blackness and that kind of thing. That's just not true. For example, here's another guy that I'm subscribed to, DCbornRob. He travels a lot of times to like Colombia, various parts of Latin America. Very, very, very good content creator. So if you have not, please subscribe to his channel as well. And the thing I like about him is he actually covers news that takes place in these other countries to give you a heads up. So before you go there, you already know about trouble. You already know about issues that are taking place there. And in particular, this is one when he actually addresses some of the racism. So this is about two brothers down in Ecuador that were falsely accused of murder because they own property there, but two bodies were found near their property. And as a result, they were arrested. And he literally said that some of the lawyers there said if they were not black, they wouldn't even been arrested. The police would have did their thorough job and really investigated things and found out they had nothing to do with those murders. So what he's been doing is trying to draw up support and get like the U.S. Embassy to come down there and really check this out. But he's been dealing with it's been a huge struggle. But as you can see, he's been addressing that. He's addressed many of these cases as well, in which there was a brother that was in Barranquilla. He set up a business there. He wound up getting robbed and killed because he was setting up a business there. Some of the locals were a little jealous. They set him up, stole his money. He wound up getting killed. But DCbornRob covers all those type of stories. So Passport Bros, we're definitely, and I don't know if he necessarily considers himself a Passport Bro, but nevertheless, he's a black male traveler that goes down there, and he does connect with the Passport Bros because he's done a video on it. So here's another example of that as well. Not to mention, here is Oshay as well. Now, I don't know if he considers himself necessarily a Passport Bro, but he does address a lot of self-hate in some of the countries, such as, for example, in Ghana, you got a lot of foreign companies coming in there and doing things like saying no blacks allowed. He talks about all the anti-blackness going on in Africa. He does a very, very good job in covering this. So just to say that we don't address anti-blackness, we don't care about it, that's just a plain lie. I mean, Oshay he goes hard on this all the time in Africa. And I would say as well, if you haven't subscribed to Oshay's channel, Kenganda, please subscribe to his channel as well. He does excellent work. If you want to know anything about Africa, he's definitely somebody that you need to reach out to. Also, a lot of brothers address this issue as well. So here is a guy who went to Greece, and a lot of people may remember the story. All he did literally there was take a picture with like one of the hostess at I think it was like at a bar or something like that. Some of the racist men that were jealous of him because the woman literally asked him for a picture. He didn't even ask her. She approached him. He wound up getting killed. And this was all over like the internet. It was big news. And as you can see, at first they tried to find these people not guilty, but then later, because there was such pressure from the media and people were talking about how racist and anti-black this was, they're actually doing like a retrial now. So, well, this was back then. But either way, what I'm trying to say is that we do cover these stories. We are aware that when you go outside of America, there are little certain pockets that you may want to avoid, which is why when I did my video on like top countries to visit as Passport Bros, if you notice, the majority of those weren't in Europe, because there's a percentage there where I would just tell you to just, in my opinion, just to avoid, and so that leads me to when Amira said, she pretty much was saying that the Passport Bros, you guys don't go to countries like the Middle East and all that kind of stuff. And the way I really addressed her was just saying that a lot of times those countries are mostly Muslim countries. A lot of African Americans are Christian. So it doesn't really work out for us there. Not to mention that in the Muslim community, especially in those areas, there is a lot of anti-blackness as well. And I actually show you in this quick, and I want to keep this video long, which is why if you notice I'm kind of breezing through as I'm doing this. But here is, here's an article by Washington Post, and they looked at map of the world's most and least racially tolerant countries. And let's go down to where they talk about which ones were the best. And look at this. India and Jordan was far the least tolerant. And what did I say? Latin American countries were the most tolerant. The only exceptions they gave were maybe Venezuela and the DR. And right now, Venezuela is destabilized. Right now, my fiance is in Venezuela. I don't have any issues at all. And you can ask many Passport Bros who are currently there in Latin America, whether they're in Brazil or Colombia. I mean, the Venezuelans are checking very heavy for brothers. Not to say that there aren't any racist ones, anti-black ones. Because as I said before, you have countries such as like Argentina, which has somewhat of some, in my opinion, a lot of anti-blackness there. Even Costa Rica has a little bit of it, but it's more like colorism. But, for the most part, as you can see, Latin American countries are the most tolerant. And I'm going to show you another list that they did. This is from the World Population Review, and it's doing least racist countries. And what they did is they put together a list of 78 countries. And I want you to look at which ones are like in the top as far as like least racist. Look where Brazil is. Out of 78 countries, it ranked 18. Look at Colombia, 21 out of 78. Look at DR, 22 out of 78. And them mentioning the DR is racist, what they're talking about is when the Haitians come over into the DR, there has been like a lot of prejudice towards them, even racism, where they try to like immediately push them out of the country for the most part. Like, and the problem is sometimes those people are actually citizens of the DR, but they have like a lot of this racism towards them. But that's more what it's addressing. But I've been in the DR. Most of the brothers, several videos, brothers constantly all the time in the DR have no issues there. But yeah, so and I want to show, and what do we have here? You're going to start noticing more Middle Eastern countries where it starts to get a little bit more racist, which is why in general you don't see a lot of passport bros in like a lot of these Middle Eastern countries. Look where the United States is towards the bottom, which is why I keep saying it's one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most racist countries to go to. If you could deal with racism here in the United States, like I said, everything else, look at all these countries above. El Salvador, Guatemala, even when it's talked about India being one of the most racist, but look, as you go up, look what the Philippines are in comparison to the United States. Less and less and less, which is why I always promote Colombia. When I talked about Germany. Now, I disagree with them on Greece because I do see a lot of, and it may be like a percentage, but I generally don't tell a lot of guys to go to Greece, which is why I didn't necessarily recommend it. But a lot of guys in general, we generally are recommending countries where black men in general, which is why you keep saying, why do black men go to these same countries? That is the reason why. Those countries tend to have less anti-blackness. After you get out of the United States, why would you want to go to another country that has a lot of racism and anti-blackness there? So we are concerned about it. We do know about it. Let me see. What else can I show you guys? 10 best and worst countries for... These are the most and least tolerant countries. This was back in 2016. But let's look at what was the most tolerant. They try to say a lot of... Which Netherlands wasn't that bad. I didn't really have any issues there. But they try to put a lot of more European countries. I don't know. For the most part, a lot of these, I haven't heard like a whole lot of it, but I generally don't necessarily recommend. These are like Western countries, and we already know about a lot of feminism. So even though it might not be racist, but there is like a lot of feminism there. So that's why I don't necessarily recommend a lot of passport bros go there for their first time outside of the country. Now let's look at some of the least tolerant. Look at all these countries. They either put somewhat in Africa or they put like Middle Eastern. So I said to say that we are pretty much concerned about, white supremacy, anti-blackness. We know it's there, but again, it's not going anywhere. It's everywhere. It's a global system. It's very foolish for us, put it this way. You're not going to escape prejudice. You're not going to escape that. That's just foolish. But at the end of the day, like Pablo Frescobar said, you only need one woman. We're only looking for one wife. If that is our reason for leaving the country. But outside of that, we're trying to network and build a network, amongst travelers, and we're now trying to get into finding ways to make money and business outside of the United States as well. So keep in mind, this is really just the first wave of the passport bros. It's only going to get bigger and better. So, and lastly, I'm gonna leave with this video. Then I'm going to end it. This is just to address the whole anti-blackness, white supremacy thing in general. Here's a guy over in the Philippines who's winning. I just want to show a little bit of this. And on that note, you guys tell me what you think in the comments about what this woman has said. Are you worried, not worried about anti-blackness? Like, how do you feel about the whole thing? And this includes all passport bros. Do we promote white supremacy, anti-blackness? Are we ignoring it? Are we co-signing it? What do you guys think in the comments? Please subscribe to my channel if you have not. Please subscribe, but also hit that thumbs up. I definitely appreciate it. I want to get these messages out there. Hit the notification bell so you can know when I drop my new content. And until next time, this is your boy, the Passport Bro Wingman, signing off.
Dear Passport Boys, dear Passport Bros, stop calling yourself Passport Boys and Passport Bros. Are you going to the Philippines to look for a Filipina queen or what? So stop calling yourself Passport Boys and Passport Bros. Start calling yourself passport kings.